So let's get started. So I'm doing a session on AI called Comparing and Contrasting Video Insights. I am the director of technology at a company called RealEyes Media. We're a strategic consultancy and application development shop in Denver, Colorado. We focus on advanced video streaming, infrastructure, playback, etc. If you watched the Super Bowl, the Olympics recently on your desktop browser, that was our player playing it back for you. So hopefully it worked well. We also have designed ECDN and live streaming infrastructure for closed-down networks such as Oracle's. We love building solutions to manage live and VOD assets. So think of workflow and transcoding and all those things for game companies like EA Games and Viacom. And finally, we partner with industry leaders such as Wowza, NGINX, and Adobe. So part of my job is to keep a pulse on all the new technology that's out there and figure out what makes sense to let our clients know about and integrate into our own solutions. So what's the problem? Why is AI a buzzword right now? So think about these media libraries. The more video content that we create, the larger our libraries get. And we only have a limited amount of humans on our staff to ingest that media and to process and add metadata tags to that media. I was talking to somebody recently, and they said, you know, this used to be a task for my interns, but now I don't get to have interns anymore. So now I got to enter all that metadata in manually myself, and that's not very fun. Not to mention, you just can't keep up. There's so much new content being cataloged and dumped into your OVP or your MAM. So let's get some help making this content more searchable so that we can get some more ROI on our content. And yeah, staffing is expensive. There's a limited number of hours within the day that we can process content. If you work for a surveillance firm and you got 24/7 feeds running on 10 to 100 cameras and you're one guy, it'd be nice to get some help. You may not get human help, but you could get AI help. Also, transcription and translation. So there's the closed captioning mandates and stuff like that. We also have, 100, 150 different languages in the world. I don't know the exact count, but it's somewhere in there, I think. So being able to translate our content, even if it's not perfect, as long as somebody can watch something and get a little bit of value out of that content, it's more worth it than if they're watching that content in a language they don't speak and have no idea what's going on. So we don't all have translators on staff, but we could get some AI translation into our system. And if exactly perfect isn't a necessity, it's going to help out a lot. Or if it is, great. We add AI to our workflow that does most of the work. Then somebody scans over. It's much faster to do, to edit that pre-existing transcript than to create all by hand. And once again, surveillance use case footage, right? Or surveillance use case. So footage coming in off all these video cameras 24/7. Think about I was walking down the street today, and I went by an intersection that says, this intersection is monitored by the New York City Police. Imagine how many of those cameras exist in New York alone. And I doubt they're dedicating all of their staff to monitoring that surveillance footage. But it'd be nice to have something that's artificial, monitor it, and notice anomalies so that it can say, hey, police staff, I just saw something weird that I don't normally see at this intersection. You may want to check it out. So that's one place where AI can help as well. There's other use cases for AI, but those are kind of the three that I hear a lot of need. I know that we can also leverage AI to help with analytics. So think about somebody like Netflix, where they have millions of subscribers and they have thousands and thousands of pieces of content in their library that's all tagged with metadata. When somebody watches that content, they can point some AI to it and they can analyze, well, why is this person watching Game of Thrones? Well, I guess that's HBO, but Netflix. Why is this person watching Dexter? okay, I understand, because they really like, kind of dark humor, and they like horror or murder shows, things like that. So we can use AI for that as well. And then I've also seen AI starting to be used in production, and I've seen AI also being used in other cases as well. We'll continue to see more and more AI. How many of you are familiar with the term AI, and how many are completely new to it? Okay, since not everybody raised their hand, AI is short for artificial intelligence. So it's a computer that's been trained to think like us, okay? But the other component of that is machine learning, so ML. So it's the ability for a machine to continually get more accurate as it gets more data. So it's kind of emulating what a human does throughout their life. As a baby, if you tell me what streaming media is, I don't know. But as an adult who's in the industry, if you tell me what streaming media is, I know. And that's based on the data that I've been collecting throughout my life as a human. So that's AI and machine learning. And then we build what are called models. So if you think about it, Google, they own YouTube. So they could build a model, they could parse all of that content and build a model that says, okay, look for these things. And then here's your experience. So if you think about how many videos are on YouTube, and they're parsing through all that, using their model, that's a lot of life experience being gained through analyzing that much video. So surveillance, and we also have metadata. And the second one was transcription and translation. So I should have just gone to the next slide, right? So AI and machine learning, an intelligent machine that can make decisions based on experience. So who are the players? I'm going to tell you about 4. And then after we get through that, I'll tell you about some others. So these are the big ones. We have Amazon over here at the top left. Amazon Web Services. They actually gave a really good talk during the Content Delivery Summit on Monday. And they were actually demonstrating some things with Elemental plus AWS AI services that they were doing that were really cool. I hadn't seen that until yesterday. So they're definitely working on their services. But the core services that they have for AI are recognition. So that's computer vision. And then comprehend, it tries to understand kind of the sentiment and what's going on within the language. And then transcribe, which will, take the audio and turn it into text. So, think VTT. Like we can create VTT files with the computer doing our job for us. And then translate to get it from one language to another. So those are their core 4 services. Then Google, who I mentioned earlier, they have the cloud platform. And their services are called Video Intelligence. So that's, once again, computer vision. Natural language services, so kind of analyzing the actual language. Speech to text, once again, processing audio and spitting out text. And finally, the translation API. So if you'll notice, there's kind of a common theme here. There's certain categories that people are building service APIs against. IBM Cloud, they have Watson services, which is part of their Bluemix cloud. But the services I've seen so far, they're not quite there. So they have a computer vision service, but the big difference is you got to send break it up into images and send individual images up, so individual frames up, and they get the data back. But they do have 2 products that they've created under the banner of Watson Media. One is captioning, and the other one is video enrichment. So captioning has to do with audio and creating that text out of the audio. And video enrichment is about the computer vision piece. And then finally, we have Microsoft Azure, AKA Video Indexer. So they have their Azure portal, and they expose a number of these services individually. But then if you go to videoindexer.ai, they have this really cool user interface that you can log into and upload videos to and start getting AI-generated metadata right away for free. Well, yeah, for free right now. And we'll go into that later. So is it easy to get started? How many of you are already using AI right now? A couple of you. May I ask? AWS's AI? Yeah? Google? Microsoft's? IBM's? 2 IBM's. Awesome. I want more data on IBM. I keep talking to him. Give me more data. Third party? Which one are you using? He's who I want to be. I like it that all these other people are building these cool things so that I can just hook into them. In-house, right? Yeah, so he's building his own solution. That's pretty hot. Do you expose any of it to the public? Okay. Oh, well. I tried. So is it easy to get started? So one of the considerations when we're talking about AI is we probably have our own, video like workflow and systems. We have our own media asset manager. We have our own playout systems, et cetera. We need to figure out how do we get this AI and make it play nicely with our systems. And oftentimes, that is going to require developers. So how many of you have developers at your disposal? A couple of you. OK. Even if you don't have in-house developers, the nice thing is APIs are pretty easy to program against. So just pay a little bit of money to get a decent developer, a freelancer, to hook that stuff in for you. Put them in a sandbox first, make sure it works, and then you can put it in production. So yeah, so the nice thing is, as a non-developer, which it sounds like a good number of you don't have developers in-house, a lot of these vendors offer these kind of demos that you can play around with. The one thing is that the video indexer, theirs is pretty robust, where you can actually take widgets and embed them into your own systems. So theirs, to me, is the most complete product that you can access without having to go through contract negotiations. Google Cloud and AWS, they offer demos on their page. And they don't really expose them where you can put them into your own system, like through an embed. And embed is basically taking a code and putting an iframe into your system and just loading up their page inside of your system. They don't really do that. But they have some demos on their site, their product site, where you can play around. So you can upload your own videos and wait for it to process and just see how good their service is. Watson, which is in the top right, so we're going Google Cloud, AWS on the bottom, Watson at the top, and Video Indexer at the bottom. Watson, they actually have products they sell. So the captioning and the video cognitive services, let's go back. Video enrichment, those are paid products. They are API first, which is good. That much data I've gotten out of them. So you can theoretically buy their paid product and communicate between your system and theirs to pull that metadata into your system. And one big use case for AI is that you have this media asset manager that has all this metadata about all of the assets that are being stored in your MEM. Wouldn't it be great to have the computer generate some of that for you? So that, in addition to the title and the season and, the episode name, you have things like car crash and leopard and, little baby girl or whatever it is, so that you can actually search and discover your content much easier. For the developers, the first thing they're going to want to learn about is what's the learning curve and what software development kit is available for each of these platforms. So for AWS, they have client SDKs. So SDK is basically kind of like an accelerator, where as a developer, you don't have to write all the code from scratch. They say, hey, if you want to use our service, here's a boilerplate for you to start building your code on top of. So they have SDKs for Android, iOS, Java, .NET, et cetera, et cetera. It's all on the slide. And from my developer perspective, I have a team of developers, and they've all played around with this. Their perspective is it's neat, comprehensive, and much less wordy than Google. I'm sorry, Google, but that was a developer's opinion. And obviously, you want to listen to that because your team is going to be more productive when they feel that they, don't have to spend as much time trying to grok how to work with the software. Google Cloud Platform. So they have a good number of client SDKs as well. So C#, Go, Java, et cetera. And from a developer perspective, their API documentation, it takes a lot of clicks to get to what you need. And then it's really, really wordy. So in other words, if I just want to know, hey, how do I send my video up to your service? Rather than seeing, here's the signature of the payload that you want to send up to the service. Here's the signature, and here's 3 to 4 paragraphs on every single data point within that signature. So sometimes it's easier to have a concise version at least, and then do all your wordy stuff. So it was a very verbose documentation. And it took a lot of clicks to get to what you want to find out. IBM Cloud, I have seen the API reference. It looks pretty straightforward, but it's kind of behind a paywall. So you talk to the IBM Watson media people, and you say, this is my use case. I want to play around with your system because I think I'm going to buy it, and you probably sign some contracts. But they were kind enough to share API documentation with me as IBM partner, and it looked straightforward as well. And then Azure, Microsoft, Video Indexer, they have client SDK for .NET only. So if you don't have .NET developers in your shop, it might not be the right solution for you. Because Amazon and Google has things like Java and Android, iOS, Ruby, et cetera. Your developers might be able to build something faster on those platforms. And I think that the Video Indexer documentation, awesome. It's really well laid out, and you can inline test it out as long as you have an active account. So that's powerful. So what does each player excel in? So I only have so many hours in the day. But I have tested different kinds of footage. But there's so much data that comes back. So I kind of shifted my focus to, all right, which ones do the best with certain use cases? So thinking about like translation and transcription, thinking about video surveillance, thinking about metadata and objects, which one's the best in those cases? But the thing to keep in mind with AI is only as smart as the data that you've trained it with. So in the case of IBM Watson, if you go to their website and you look at some of the case studies, they did things for the, I think, US Open, and they did some, US Open's tennis, right? Okay, because I know they did tennis and golf, okay? So if you think about it, if you're in the industry of sports, IBM Watson might have more accurate results for you when it comes to object detection or seeing when, a ball is being hit across the court or whatever. On the other hand, if you do news footage, maybe Google's going to be better because people live stream their news over YouTube. So think about the different kinds of use cases because ultimately the data that's being processed by these machine learning, solutions is what's training that process to know or process to be smart. So in other words, I'm coming from more of a developer background, but I'm in the streaming media industry. If you ask me about which camera is the best camera, I don't know because I don't have that data in my background. I came over as a developer and started building solutions that allow people to stream what came out of the camera. But I've never been a cameraman. So that's the way to think about AI is you're going to be sending it specific data, and it's going to learn off that data. And the type of data that it learns off of is going to make it more accurate in one way or the other. And this is an example of the kind of data that you get back. The screen's a little washed out, but generally, these solutions work this way. They have an API, so application programming interface, that allows your developers to hit an endpoint. So think about you going into the browser and typing google.com and hitting enter. Well, a developer, they're going to use an API to programmatically hidden endpoint, like google.com, maybe it'll be /v2/API/vision services, whatever it is. They'll send a payload up, right? So think about like when you go to Google, you're going to type in a search string and then click enter. So they're going to send up a payload that says, hey, my video is here. Please process it. And at that point, you'll usually pull and wait for that processing to happen, because it's not instantaneous. It takes a little while to do. But then once it's done, you'll have data that you can pull down. So think of it as like search results in Google. And you pull down that data, and all of these services use this data exchange format, JSON. So they're all JSON-based, which is really great, because we've actually even taken some of these services and combined them together to get more data. So the nice thing is when you're working with one format, it makes it a lot easier to parse through, because there is a lot of data that you get back. On the left is, I sent up a trailer of, what is it, American Psycho, I think. And this is all R&D, and I just wanted to see what happens. And I sent it to Google Video Intelligence, and that's on the left. And I tried to kind of put it in similar places, but basically there's person. So it says, hey, I found a person, and I'm 97.8222, and it goes on forever. So round that number. But I'm 97.82% that at timestamp 18196, which is most likely milliseconds, I saw a person. That's the data that you get back with object detection at Google. With Azure, it says, hey, I saw a person. And the time range is, it started at 21 seconds in and 43.8, and then ended at 22 seconds, 0.140. But the difference is, I don't get any confidence back on how, I think it was a person. And the way to think about it is, I have this really old Popeye cartoon that has this villain that's hunched, and he's going like this, and he has a black overcoat on. And I ran that through AI, and it told me that it was an animal. So then I thought, I'm like, because the computer doesn't actually see. It's learning based on all this data that it's processing. Wait a second, it's a black and white cartoon. He's going like this with a big black cloak. I bet it thought it was a bat, not a person. So that confidence value is super, super important, because you're going to get gobbledygook in your media asset manager if you just throw everything in there without even thinking about it. You're going to be like, why is this pulling up as animal? It's a guy in a cloak on Popeye. Anyway, so there's no confidence value with the Azure JSON data set. Then I move over, and second from, I guess it would be your right, so the first one was AWS. I apologize. AWS has confidence. Azure, next from the left, does not. Then we go to Google, and it saw a person. And let me find that person. Where are you? Oh, but it said it was a human. And it saw it at segments, and it actually breaks it down even further. It says the first segment, I saw it from 26 second to 35 second, and I'm 95.8% confident. The second second, I saw it from 58 seconds to 62 seconds, and I'm 84.9% confident. So it breaks it down even further than AWS is. So if your basic interest is detecting objects within your video, and you want it to be accurate, you're going to want to go with like AWS or Google so far, right? There's no guarantee that Azure will continue not to provide confidence values in that case. But right now, if you were to build something, those two are providing confidence. And if you want it really, really granular, where you see like little markers on your timeline, in that case, you might want to go with Google. And then finally, over here, all the way to the right, is Watson Media. So they were nice enough to process a video for me and send me back some of their JSON examples so I could see what their service does. And they see a person. The score was 64%, so it wasn't as confident. Maybe it's because this person looked a lot different than a tennis player or a golf player. And then the occurrences, start time was 17.023. So the difference with Watson is that not only does it tell you where it first saw this person and breaks it down to each start time, but it says at that point in time, I am 91% confident that I saw that person. So they do it a little bit differently than Google does. But they do give you multiple occurrences of where they saw it and how confident they were that they saw it.
You can also have, with IBM, actually rescan the same segment multiple times to get different confidence as an aggregate.
Ooh, averaged? Nice. That's cool. I'm glad we have some IBM AI people in the room.
Is there a baseline confidence across all of them? I mean, how confident are you in the confidence?
Can I hit you up after, and then you can get me the answer, and I'll tweet it out to everybody? Yeah, that's a good question. All right, so object faces and scenes. The one thing that I see AWS doing that I didn't really see in the JSON payloads from any of the other providers is look at facial recognition. You get the XY of eyes, nose, roll, yawn, pitch. Wow, that's pretty intense. And you can also do facial matching. So if you have a high resolution like picture of a face, you can say, hey, keep an eye out for this face and tell me when you see it in the video. And they also handle streaming video as well. So most of these AI services only really work with VOD so far. AWS does streaming. So Kinesis video stream, and as I saw yesterday, AWS Elemental can be plugged in with their AI services to do live streaming as well. Google Cloud Platform. So if you're very, very curious about scenes within your video, so maybe you have a lot of long-form content because you're doing movies or TV shows, et cetera, they have a lot of scene data with per-shot annotations. So you could say, hey, I'm watching this movie, and I want to know where all of the car chases are. So you just look for car, and it should break it up and show you scene 1 has a car, scene 10 has a car, et cetera. So if you're wanting to kind of follow that use case, they may be the service to use. And then entity occurrence timestamps, that's kind of what we looked at the JSON, saying, hey, I did see human, and I saw that human 20 seconds in. And then start and end of a shot. So it'll let you know, hey, when I say I saw a car in scene 1, that was seconds 0 to 30. IBM Cloud, Watson Media, they have very in-depth detection confidence and many labels. So they have tons and tons of labels. They even have taxonomy within their labels as well. So it's basically, this is an animal, this is a mammal, et cetera, down, down, down. And then compliance checking. There may be compliance checking with other vendors, but IBM makes it a point to say they have a lot of compliance checking. So adult content, trademarks, violence, fraudulent materials. So if your use case is, I want to make sure that nobody's ripping off Netflix's movies, IBM may be the way to go. And then Azure. I feel that Azure, it's kind of like a Microsoft thing, I feel. Azure to me is I'm like this new person that's just getting started, and I don't want to work too hard, and I want the 80% and get into it really, really easily. That I think is Azure. Their documentation is good. They have a really, really good product that has widgets that you can embed into your own site, and we'll see those in a sec. And then they also do people's celebrities too. So if you want to see, when's the last time Kanye West was at a beach, it'll show you that kind of stuff. And they do OCR, brands, and they do a little bit of explicit content detection as well. So it's all about the use case. And like I said, they all return JSON data, so there's nothing stopping you from using all of them if you want to. So for audio transcription and translation, AWS just recently announced, right about the time of NAB. How many of you were at NAB as well as here? A couple of you, OK. Yeah, so I was trying to get preview access to their audio transcription and translation. It didn't happen. I went to an AWS event and couldn't get any access. Then they released it a month or two later. So they just released it. It's very new, at least to the public. They have limited language support for now. I think it's like 5 or 6 languages. Last time I checked was a couple weeks ago, so it may be more now. But they launched with like 5 or 6 languages. So if like all of the languages is your use case, they may not be the best yet. But their detection was seemingly very accurate. So in other words, OK, they may be only doing 5 languages because those languages are very, very accurate, rather than trying to do 100 kind of half, you know. Per word confidence was pretty good, too. So Google Cloud Platform, if you want this very, very globalized, then they're the people to look at. They do 100+ languages. They also have natural transcription. And the interesting thing is if you don't have very sensitive data, you can actually opt into public AI training. So that's not you like learning how to use AI. It's actually, OK, I am cool with the data that I'm processing contributing to Google's machine learning to have more data to learn off of. So if it's not sensitive, why not? Because you're helping the world create a more powerful AI named Skynet. All right, IBM Cloud, Watson Media. They can do it, they say 95% accurate in the right conditions. And that's one thing to keep in mind with audio transcription. It's in the right conditions. So if there was like 5 other people up here talking to me and we're all talking over each other, it might be kind of hard for an AI to pick out a transcription. Or it might be kind of garbled. Or if I was like sitting, you know, down at a hurricane in Florida talking on a mic and there was all this wind blowing sounds, it might be hard for it to pick it out. It would pick something out, but it may not be super, super accurate. But it might be hard. Like, my hearing isn't the best. I may have just as hard of a time transcribing that, too. But if the right conditions are there, 95% accuracy. And the nice thing is you can go there and you can edit the transcription and you save some time on typing. I'm still trying to get some more info on exactly which languages they do. I've only seen English. I've looked at their site. Do you guys know? OK, so English and not very accurate French. Thank you. So that's your story there. So if you want language, Google Cloud Platform for now. Sentiment analysis. So, you know, I want to know the difference between Teletubbies and Dexter. Okay? Amazon Web Services, sentiment scores on key phrase mentions, and then also sentiment scores on sentences. We'll see that here. So I'm doing this like demo at the end, and hopefully, let's see how we're good on time. Key phrase mentions and sentences. So in other words, like, if I'm very, very angry and I'm like yelling at somebody, it's going to be a negative sentiment. Versus now, the way that I talk, it is probably kind of a neutral sentiment. You know, that the volume of my voice may be kind of thought of as negative, but I'm not being negative right now. So it's kind of trying to analyze, you know, what the sentiment is of that audio within the video. And then it'll look at the words, too. And, you know, if I say a lot of bad words or, you know, fires and things like that, then it might kind of lean towards negative. Google Cloud Platform. Sentiment scores on sentences, and nouns is scored not only for sentiment, but for prominence as well. So in other words, it's like thinking about that word and its sentiment in the context of the video as a whole. So that's pretty interesting. I think Watson, at least what they advertise, is kind of the most mature in this regard. And they got joyous, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust. And they have scores on text on a scale of 0 to 1, and overall sentiment as well. So they've really thought about sentiment. And then Azure, they do an OK job. And they got sentiment scores on sentences, videos broken down in percentages as well. So, you know, if sentiment's a very important thing to you, yeah, I'd probably look at Watson Media. Or if you don't want to go through all those negotiations, and I don't even know quite what the price is, you know, maybe look at like Google or AWS. So surveillance is an interesting one. And I believe that surveillance is going to drive a lot of AI in regard to object detection, right? Because we're trying to figure out of that 24/7 video stream off this camera that's very boring to watch for the most part, when there's an incident. So being able to utilize AI in that regard and notify us on anomalies, I think that's a very powerful thing. And I've seen some companies sprout up trying to do that. Even like, I think it's Google that has that camera that they sell to the public now that you can like put at your house and it like reports back to their services. That's pretty interesting. So this is definitely an up and coming area. Now to do that though, you need to be able to watch live, especially if you want to react quickly, right? If you see this car like zoom through an intersection in Manhattan at like 200 miles per hour, probably need to hit that pretty quickly, you know, before that guy is off in New Jersey or wherever. So AWS, they have Kinesis video streams, and now they can also do AWS Elemental and utilize AI services in conjunction with that. There was a really good speaker yesterday, and I'm going to try and get some more data on that. I'll tweet if I get anything cool. But Kinesis video streams at AWS, it requires you to utilize their SDKs. So the nice thing is if you know some C# or C++, Java, or Android, you could take their SDK and do what's called a producer and a consumer. And the producer throws that data, so the live stream data, into what's called a stream. And then that stream's being processed through their services, and the consumer is listening for, you know, whatever you want it to listen for, whether it's a car going way too fast or a specific face or whatever it is. Out of the box, that SDK provides the ability to do facial detection. And when AWS had a booth at NAB, they actually had a vendor, just a vendor booth. Like one of their things on display was a computer with a camera. And as you were walking by, they were using Kinesis video streams to count the number of people that walked by their booth during the day. And that computer actually showed a graph on a timeline of how many people were walking by at noon, 2 o'clock, 3:15, et cetera. It was really cool. So being that it's an SDK and being that they do have other services, you could theoretically build in additional features by taking that data down at periodic points and sending that over to the stuff that requires VOD, so pre-recorded content, and then processing it that way. So doing like little 30-second chunks or whatnot. Google Cloud, they do a 5-minute streaming transcription, and I think that's kind of based on the fact that they have Siri. So it's more from like a dictation perspective, but you know, that's pretty much it that I've seen so far. I'm sure they got something up their sleeve, but that's what's publicly available. IBM Cloud, when speaking with one of their senior product guys, they did say that it's on the roadmap, but we know what that means. Soon. And then Azure, I haven't seen anything yet. So paying, all these guys have calculators. And then if you want IBM, you can talk to their sales rep. So I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty details. I'll just give you a general gist. They all have some try before you buy. I'm sure if you talk to a sales rep and you qualify as somebody with money to spend, they'll probably set you up with a sandbox. But these other services have some level of free, testing. So first off, I mean, with AWS, you can go to their, API page and play with their demo. And that's free. You don't have to pay for any of that. And you can play around, because you're going to have a specific kind of video. And you want to make sure that, hey, is this AI service actually going to work for my video or not? So you can go up to their site. But then once you're ready to start building something, they have a free tier. So for a whole year, as long as you only do a little bit of it at a time, you don't have to pay. But then once you pay, it's not terribly expensive. Like you're not talking millions of dollars or anything like that. Google Cloud Platform, they're actually very generous in the fact that they give you $300 to use over the course of a year. So once again, you can go to their website, you can play around with their demo, see if it works with your data, and then when you're ready to actually spend time building something, you got $300 in credits. Azure, You just create an account, and you got 40 hours to just upload your video. You don't have to build anything. And you can actually, this is really, really useful. They're in preview still, so it's free. And you can embed widgets into your own website or within your MAM, you know? So I actually have a customer where we threw just another panel into their MAM that loaded up the video indexer widgets once that data was available. And then we also chucked that information into metadata fields within their schema. So not only could you actually visually see it when you were looking at that specific asset, but you could also search for it. So that was cool. Ongoing cost. So they all pretty much follow the similar model. Well, two of them, because one of them doesn't list their price, and the other one you have to talk to a sales rep. But it's kind of a per minute, a second for analysis, and paying for storage. And then if you're doing live with AWS, you pay for Kinesis as well. So Kinesis is another service that's outside of their AI services. Google Cloud, same deal. So a lot of times, the way that these AI services work is that you actually have to upload your content to their storage. And then they process off of their own storage. So hopefully your stuff isn't so sensitive that you're not allowed to store it. But you know, if it is, like AWS has GovCloud, and you can create, you know, a private connection to their network and have your own private bucket. And I'm sure Google's probably got something in the works that's similar if they don't already have it. So tips and thoughts. I'm going to get to the good stuff here soon. Demos. So yeah, if you're thinking about leveraging AI, you want to think about your content profile, because the AI is only as smart as the data that's been sent to it. So, you know, with Google, they have YouTube, Microsoft. I'm not sure what they trained theirs on. Maybe Office tutorials. And then IBM has, you know, the US Open and Masters golf tournament. I was trying to think of that earlier. So, you know, think about, you know, your own life experiences. The things that you know and the things that you don't are based on what you've personally experienced. So these AI systems are only as accurate as what they know. And then what is your functional use case? Are you trying to do transcription, translation? Are you trying to do object detection? Are you trying to populate a media asset manager with a bunch of metadata? Are you doing video surveillance? Thinking about those things will help you decide which AI service to engage with first. And how accurate do you need it? Each one of these obviously is going to have some false positives. Once again, go back to that kind of confidence rating. So if you see that it detected, you know, a person's hand, but it was only 40% confident, I don't know if you necessarily want to send that over to your media asset manager. You may want to have some kind of check in there within your workflow that says, hey, by the way, let's throw anything that's 95% and above into our media asset manager. If it's less than that, let's keep that data. But maybe as we have time, it's not a required step. We'll have somebody go in there and take a look at that and maybe edit it, remove what they don't need, and then put additional data into the MAM as well. And then do you have any developers? You know, in the earlier part of this session, I was like, okay, they have, you know, demos, they have API documentation, they have SDKs, and, you know, your developers are going to determine who you end up working with, because not every developer knows every programming language. Each one is going to have their own preference on what they're going to work most efficiently with. And if you don't have any developers at all, maybe it makes sense to go with IBM Watson, so that you only have to pay somebody to glue your system together with theirs. And definitely play around. I mean, there's plenty of opportunity to play around with these cutting-edge technologies. So that was the big four. But they're not the only players in the game. Like, awesome guy in the back that's building his own stack, his own AI. So, you know, yeah, I didn't know where to put this slide, but did anybody actually watch this trailer for the movie Morgan? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so obviously the AI wasn't holding a camera because it can't, but after this content was produced, AI built this trailer for the movie Watson. So that's pretty cool. And I think Netflix is doing that. I'm guessing Netflix is doing that. You know, when they have this autoplay and you're kind of scrolling through and you see these trailers that are summarizing the show with weird music that doesn't quite match. I get like classical music when I'm like going through sci-fi. So it doesn't quite make sense to me. All right, this is a really cool third-party AI. So they were born in like R&D at universities. They've created that into a product that's really compelling. They have 300 minutes for free, and they also have an API as well. Velosa, they're based in Europe. I think it's like Scandinavia or somewhere like that. But the cool thing is that they have a really good searching algorithm. They seem pretty accurate, and their site actually is very similar, from my perspective, to Video Indexer in its maturity. Also, they do live stream processing as well. I've actually had a chance to look at their API documentation. I can't tell you, exactly how it works, but based on the API documentation, and I've seen this, I saw this at NAB. They had it at their booth. They do process live, where you can say, hey, here's the live stream, process away. The cool thing about this demo is that it could detect brands, it could detect objects, it could detect various sentiments within the video, and it was a live stream. So if you're like, wanting that kind of surveillance or compliance checking use case, they may definitely be somebody to check out. And there's some other notables here. We got Hive AI, Veritone, and Clarify. Veritone, they don't really have like an open demo that you can play around with. But Hive AI and Clarify, I signed up for demos for both of them, I think. So you can like get in there and kick the tires. And I think that's the last slide. Yep. Closing thoughts. OK, so I'm actually going to pull some of this stuff up here. Let's see if they load. All right, so this is something that we've built in-house and we've been playing around with. And the reason, so first off, it's really dark. This is developer design, so don't knock us too hard. It points to either AWS or Google, or it points to both. In addition to that, some of the features we played around with is we could actually do a face upload. So we can upload faces and give them names and add them to collections. And that's specifically for AWS, because AWS allows you to upload collections of faces and then search the video for those faces. The one thing that I will mention, though, is you're going to want to upload multiple faces. You want to make sure the resolution is good, because the lesser the quality and the fact that somebody may be moving around in the video, giving it more input, right, is going to make it more accurate. But we have seen it detect faces. And the cool thing about our system that we built is we actually were kind of POCing out the ability to create a watch. So that kind of surveillance use case where it's like, hey, I just detected June in that video. I'm going to email somebody and let them know. And then, oh, yeah, I do have some faces in there. And then we can also watch for like tags, transcript, and mentions. So transcript and mentions is like text generated by the audio, and then tags are things that were detected within the video, so what the computer vision saw. But the general gist here is I decide, hey, do I want to do AWS or do I want to do Google? I do a collection or not. I select the language, and this list is based off of Google. Unfortunately, as a consultancy that has to build clients out, we only get a limited amount of time to play with our POCs. And then you just drag a video in. After you're done, we actually start getting a list of these videos that are processed. And if you notice, it's kind of small text right now. But what I did is I took this Tears of Steel, which is open source kind of movie, and then I also took that American Psycho trailer, and I ran it through both systems. And then I ran it through both of them together to just see what the difference was. So let's take a look at Tears of Steel through AWS. And let's take a look at Tears of Steel through Google. So I'm going to pause this one right now. So we have this Blender Foundation thing. And you can see down here, we have the transcript. Oh, I can't control the volume. Can you maybe turn it down slightly? All right, cool. Thank you. So yeah, so you can see the transcript down at the bottom. The emotion that it detected was basically a positive sentiment. I get timecode data back.
Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready?
Right, so that's pretty cool.
You're a rock star.
All right, so I'm going to pause this. So then the other neat thing we have here is, here's the tags. So tags are like the objects that AWS detected. And we have a slider. So if I say I care about anything that's 30% confident or more, that's how much more stuff it detected. And it's like, well, I think I saw a jar, but I was only 56% confident on that. So let's go there and just see. Oh, I might have to be playing this. One sec. I don't see a jar there. Do you see a jar? No, I don't see a jar. All right, let's slide it back up. So it's all human, people, and person. So obviously, you know, it's all these systems are still learning. So the more generic something is, it's going to be a lot more confident about that. But, time code? It thought it saw a person. All right. Oh, you know what? This is AWS, so I don't think it was telling us that. Also, you'll see that it's calling people's names out too. Tanya K, Connor, Paulo. Does anybody know the cast of Tears of Steel? No? All right. Then we have mentions. And mentions come from the audio as well. So like 432 way quantity, right? Because it's numbers. About 10 minutes, quantity, numbers. Earth, location. Syria, location. Pentagon, location. It saw some faces. This is face comparison. It didn't notice any of the faces I had uploaded. And then AWS doesn't do scenes. So let's go look at this same video. And this is Google. So Google had, like, the first scene was 0 to 8 seconds. The second scene was 8 to 13 seconds. Then it thinks it saw a skyscraper from seconds 13 to 18. And if we just keep scrolling throughout this whole Tears of Steel video, it detected all these different scenes. And it also we took a little thumbnail of that. So scroll down, how many scenes does it think there's? So like 95 scenes. So it's detecting when the video itself kind of changes. So this gave us an opportunity to kind of test the difference between Google and AWS. And then in addition to that, we have the ability to combine the two. So with this, we actually have the Russian on the left, and then we have the translation on the right. Doesn't help that, you know, we have closed captions in here, but. And then let's take a look at this one here. We have this Japanese. So I know Japanese some, but I don't know any Russian. I know this word right here that I'm hovering over is ramen. Okay, he just said ramen. He said ramen. So we have the Japanese on the left and the English on the right. So this is pretty cool. And also, so this is kind of like what we play around with. But if you just want to look at Microsoft, you can create an account at the video indexer. And here's Tears of Steel again. Oh, come on. Load. Uh-oh. My internet. Let's try this again. Here. But you can go in the video indexer if you have internet connection. Oh, that's what happened. 1 second here. All right. And video indexer is really cool. So video indexer is actually calling out all the different people that it saw within this video. And I've uploaded like an interview of Elon Musk, and it could tell me that, yo, that was Elon Musk in there, and here's a link to his Wikipedia entry, etc. But we can then, look at where the people are in the video. So there's like kind of scrub areas for that, and click on here, and we can see that this dude with an eyepiece is at that location. He's right over here on the left.
Should have about 10 minutes.
We can go see where this guy is.
We're only one.
So there he is. And the other cool thing is they have this transcript that auto-scrolls. Not only does it do like audio, but it will also tell you where like it sees like OCR. And you can, kind of navigate.
Why don't you just admit that you're freaked out by my robot hand?
And if I don't speak English, I can actually come in here and I can do, Korean. Obviously, the audio is not going to change, but then as a Korean speaker, I can watch that scroll through. If you'll notice, too, with Video Indexer, you have the ability to edit. So I can turn editing on. So as a transcriptionist, I can come in here and I can make changes to that transcription. They have widgets. So the left and the right, they're two different widgets that you can embed into your page. And then if you create a bridge within your page, you can actually have them in sync. And you get all that for free right now. So that's pretty sweet. And you have the ability to actually look at the underlying JSON data that this is driven on. And, some other features as well. You can edit, and create clips off of this and do some other things. So it's a really powerful platform out of the box. They don't have, the live stream analysis. They don't have like the hundreds of languages that Google does, but they have a good number of languages. And if you don't have a lot of developers in-house and you're okay with widgets because maybe you're just using this on the production and curation side, why not? So that is Video Indexer, and that's AWS and Google. And oops. It's going to go back to the beginning. That was our demo. So yeah, AI is finally becoming useful for video. Play around and see which ones are the best for your use case. AI confidence data is key. And not only that, but do a little double checks when you have time so that you can kind of help train some of these things. And some of those, I'll share these slides, but some of those other services, I think Hive AI and maybe Clarify or both, they actually have really cool, easy to use custom model creation where you can actually train it on your own data, and it's a little bit more exposed than these top 4. So if training the data and making it really, really accurate is your goal, you may want to look at some of the other vendors out there other than the big 4. And then, train it when you can and make sure that it's learning so that you can continue to get more automation out of the computer. Thank you for coming to my session.